So today, this is our Thursdays group, and this is just some stuff that's been coming to me. It's nothing new. It's almost like what they say, there's nothing new under the sun. Mm-hmm. It's just my interpretation as I see things. And to me, we've already discussed this, but I believe all of it is consciousness. I mean, reality is definitely reality. If somebody came up and shot you with a bullet, unless you're Neo, it's going to affect you. But consciousness is the root of that. And for me, consciousness, really, the function of conscious is to be more conscious. So we're always expanding, we might use that word, growing in consciousness. So as we expand, hey Marianne, as we expand and grow in consciousness, basically our understanding of things expands, and our ability to handle and address something changes too. Because the more aware we become, the more we're able to do things like energy work, like EFT's been a huge influence on me. I use my own little version, and I've shared that with you all. But years ago that was non-existent, and I don't even think we have the consciousness to play with it at that level. So not only are we individually have consciousness growing, it's collectively growing. And I really think that 2012 is really not necessarily, it is about a shift, but I see it like a consciousness shift. How many of y'all see that other little YouTube I did recently about the Buddha consciousness and then the Christ consciousness?
Excellent.
Yeah, and this is just my perception. You don't have to buy anything I say, but it's just how I see things happening. And then the new one is so we have Buddha consciousness, which basically means mentally aware. You have to be mentally aware before you can embody your heart or be in your heart. And the example of that, some people say, well, you just need to be loving. Well, that's just part of the picture, because to me, you got to marry the Buddha and the Christ together. That's your head and your heart. And, if you meditate and get in these really nice places and you get in your car and drive along and you hear something on the radio or it upsets you and you kind of start losing your center, right? Well, your consciousness is there to help you steer that back into place. So just trying to be loving all the time isn't necessarily the answer to everything. It's a big part of it. And for me, we need to be embodying more and more the Buddha, which is being more consciously aware of your mental patterns, and then the Christ, which is being more in that loving space. Because the new grid, and this is my interpretation of that, the new grid is coming in, or it's already started to happen, you see it all over the world. People are coming together, and it's the Holy Spirit grid. And the Holy Spirit grid is what ties that, not just your mind to your body, which is body is Jesus, and the mind is Buddha. It ties it all together with spirit. So mind, body, and spirit. And holy as in whole. So the world will be becoming more and more holy as a whole unit. And think if we were all collectively focused on one thing and we were united on those thoughts, literally things would change like that, because here we are in small groups doing things, but if we unite all over the planet, basically we steer our planet and our future together collectively. Focused, but we got to be in the right consciousness and we got to be in the heart to do that. And that's why those two we got to really start focusing on, and why I've been drawn to do some body talk sessions in our group with the tapping. Because whoever comes up here, even though you don't come up here, it's a collective. And all of us, the more you come to a particular group, there's a thing called entanglement that happens. You begin to get entangled in the group. So as people grow and expand, you get to go along with that. So by somebody coming up and getting a session, the whole group gets a session. So I just want to go over this first. And this is just, again, my interpretation of what's going on. So, effed up mind game. If all existence is rooted in consciousness, then what are you really shifting, changing, or healing? In other words, what is doing the perceiving that is causing the limitation, illness, and disease? And I got the answer right there. It's the mind. The mind is the whole thing. The mind, the consciousness, your awareness. So if it's limited, you have a limited life. And the cool thing about life, it's cool when you can see it from a higher perspective, is that when you're limited, you keep drawing limitation to you that pushes on you, you don't like it, so you push for expansion, right? Well, that expansion is literally your awareness growing, right? That's what you're learning, if anything, is how you can see things in a broader and broader perspective. If the mind is it, then you are really working to convince your mind of something, aren't you? So if the mind is all there is, then healing is really just a matter of fact of convincing yourself that the limitation isn't there. You get what I'm saying? It's a little bit different way of looking at things, not entirely, but one way that I'm seeing it more and more is that the shift that needs to happen is if we're having a limited life based on a limited perception, we have to take the limited perception out to have the expansion in life. And that can be a slow process, or that can be a quick process. And this year is going to be more of a quickening, so things are going to start happening a lot quicker and faster. And one of the reasons I'm drawn to do what we're doing tonight. So as this quickening happens, these shifts happen quicker and quicker. And the aha basically is like a doorway into a paradigm shift if you use it correctly. But I've noticed even with myself, I can have an aha, and it typically lasts like 3 days, right? If I don't move on it or act on like this aha, within a couple of days, it's like, it really wasn't that big a deal. But those are like paradigm shifts. So to me, we need to embody those paradigm shifts, not just be a mental thing. So we got to bring it into the body. And I can't go over in time limit, I can't go over what I was going over with the consciousness, but whatever's in the mind consciousness has to be embodied. And we got to start embodying, my perception, we've got to start embodying all the stuff we're talking about in New Age and mental abilities. We got to start embodying that before we can ever hope to put on the Holy Spirit grid or the consciousness.
Lately, the last couple of weeks since I've basically been staring at my ceiling, I'll be doing things and it's like I'll see something and it'll remind me of like my dad, just whatever I see. And then I'll think about, okay, that reminds me of my dad. And then I'll think of just one little moment in my childhood, and then it's like, that's why I do what I do now. It's and they're like these just little pops. Yeah. And I'm having more and more and more of those. It's really weird.
Well, the thing about it, what illness is illness is actually, illness is another example of restriction, right? So anytime we get sick, we can actually be happy on one level because what's happening is some restriction has bubbled to the surface, whether it's a physical body, mental, or emotional. So as you're going through this process, all this stuff and limitation that was there is going to start being rooted out. That's that process. And sometimes it can be, not that difficult. And some other times it's like really smacking you around physically, mentally, emotionally. So, and you talked about your energy level not being extremely high, but you're really going through a purging. You're not just purging physically, but you're purging consciousness, emotionally, and mentally. And when you get on the other side of that, you'll be so much freer than you were before.
Right.
Especially related to the body part. Remember, body parts relate back to what the issue is. That's all creativity. This is going to free up a huge amount of your ability to create in the physical world, because that's the lower chakra that you're at.
Well, another thing, John, I'd like to point out to you, because I listened to that video that you had about what you eat.
Yeah.
Well, since December the 18th, I have been really limited on what I've eaten.
Yeah.
And it really is changing how I think, and it's really a weird process. I mean, all of a sudden, what I would ordinarily think about something now is a total different path, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And it's strange. It's really strange, but it is.
Well, like I mentioned in the video,
I'm set in stone,
Yeah. And it's good to have those experiences. Like Tracy said, she couldn't eat much, so she's gone through like a physical purge too.
It's just like, I eat, take a couple of bites, and it's almost like food is not a major issue as far as what I need.
Well,
and so it's like I'm just finding other things to do.
And food is the biggest distraction out there. If you have if you're in a bad mood, cry, it's just some kind of food away. And it's basically, not only is it the food have chemicals in it just naturally, but there's a lot of false chemicals in there. And Karen's right. It's like I've noticed, and I was fighting this I've known it for years, but this last year I was really struggling with it. That was my limitation coming up. Because you have to look forward to limitation, because that's telling you you're stuck and you need to keep working at it. And the determination is what gets you through the limitation. But anyway, I noticed that in a session, if I'm not eating pristinely, that affects what I pick up, and it affects the ability of what I can do. And as this group is trying to expand and grow and like start to kind of get to where they can embody like the Holy Spirit, a consciousness, we've got to get pure. Remember, so we had the mental awareness, which is consciousness, Buddha, and then Jesus came after that. And Jesus is about the heart, but it's also about transformation of the physical body. And when you're in that right space, then what happens, even your blood changes. It's like, literally, it's like not Christ is separate, you are in sync with that same energy. And the Holy Grail is that energy that surrounds our body and centers right there. So when you have that certain frequency going on, not only do you start pumping out healing to your own body and transformation, but you actually start sending it out to others, because the pericardial meridian starts right up here in the upper shoulder and goes right through the hand. That's the palm chakra, is the sac that surrounds the heart. So as we get in that space, we can transmit it out. But we've got to be embodying it, and embodying it has to do just like, because you have to look at each like icon, like Buddha, you look at Buddha's life to help you master mental awareness, period, okay? You look at Jesus' life to help you embody the physical aspect of it, which is the heart. The heart, actually, there's a thing that happens with the heart. Each heartbeat, there's a fractal, so there's a beat here, but then there's rides on it. So in Chinese medicine, there's pulse reading. It's like 6 pulses on each side. And there's even more than that, but that shows you that they're reading more than one pulse. They're reading the waves on the heart. So your heart is telling your body what shape it is in, or basically, is it healthy or ill? And by you changing your frequency and getting into that unconditional loving space, your heartbeat syncs with the universe. And when you sync with that singularity, the singularity is where you connect to God. And pretty amazing stuff, like the apple on, you look at things in the past and you read something or see something after you've kind of studied or had like an aha, and it seems so deeper. So even though I say it now, it doesn't seem that big of a deal, but last week when I was working on that video, I was thinking, what's a good example of this whole toroidal field? And I thought about an apple. Apple actually has the whole shape of the toroidal field. It actually cones in the top, cones in the bottom, and then the seeds are right in the center, right? So if you cut it in half, you've got the seeds that created the very thing there. So the source is right there. The source of the apple is inside the apple. That is exactly what that singularity heart chakra space means. The God is right here inside of you. If you're in the right vibration, you're channeling it everywhere. So to the degree that you're out of that, then we don't. So if you are 20% convinced something will happen, you deserve it, etc., you will get 20% of it. Okay, so I'm really wanting to move more into 100% of not just like playing around with metaphysical concepts, but embodying the spirit and really making some changes in my life and in the world I'm in. And that change, so that 20% change could be in health, wealth, or happiness. So healing is about being determined to be 100% convinced of a possibility. So if the limitation is in our mind, then really that's what we have to work with, right? But sometimes the mind is kind of tricky. So you can like say these affirmations, that help kind of convince yourself, but that doesn't always do it, right? So the determination is what's been coming to me, that word, because we hear about that life is determined, and we determine what happens in our life. That's true, but that to me goes back to the determination you have to have something. So when I had that shift, and I talked about this in that last video I did, last year I was like, okay, I've done so much and worked so much, spirit, so really, do I have to like clean up my food? I was coming from that perception, right? And then after I did my fast, which I'm not saying you have to do that, after I did that, my perception changed. And what happened is I was hearing it from the other side. It's like, what are you willing to do to get what you're talking about? And what happens is a lot of us, even in this group, we have these ideas of what we want to do, but we always short-circuit ourselves because we don't stay determined enough to do it. So if you're only 20% determined, you're only going to get 20% of the outcome. So it's like the message I was getting from Spirit is, what are you willing to do to get it? And if you really want it, this is what you got to do. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Until you believe it 100%, you will not get the complete package. So doctors, pills, EFT, Reiki, the list is endless, are all ways of convincing ourselves of something, if you think about it that way, right? So if we're really just treating the mind, if you can have a mental aha transformation, remember when Jesus walked around and just said, get up and walk? I mean, that's an instant transformation. That's what my focus is moving towards. And I believe we can all do that. Do I believe it 100%? No, because it's not happening in my life. So that tells me I don't believe it 100%. You see what I'm saying? When I believe that 100%, it'll start showing up. That's what I'm focused on now, is believing that, to be 100% convinced of that. Because I know it in my head, I know it in my Buddha, but I don't have it in body yet. And that's what I'm focusing on. Bottom line, perception dictates experience of reality. And reality is what is real for you, because all of us could experience life a little bit different. Limiting perception is the dictator, and equals a limiting life, which is reality. So your perception tells you what your reality is. If it's to the degree your perception is limited, is to the degree your life is limited. And sometimes we're really clear in one area of our life. You know, we may be really clear about relationships, but when it comes to work and money, we suck in that. You know, so we're limited with how much wealth we have, or we're limited in the area of love, and on, right? So those issues do come into play. A 20% change in perception equals a 20% change in health or quality of life. What turns the limit into expansion, the 20% into 100%? That's determination. Determination, being willing to do whatever it takes to get what you're talking about. And to me, you know, I talked about this last time. Like, say, here we're at the bottom of the mountain. The spiritual path is like becoming oneness with the source, because oneness is like that point. So as you spiral down and out from source, everything gets further and further away. We have the illusion of separation. But as we start climbing this hill back to source, or the mountain, you know, wherever we're stuck is to the degree or the level we can perceive things. And I got this thing recently about, is like, if you want to get here, this is what you got to do. So then it takes determination to get there. And another way you could look at it is, I've heard this before, is like the path of mastery, or the path that masters walk, is lightly traveled, because there's a lot of people that have, like, they want to do this, but it's determination that they lack to really push themselves up to the top. And we got to start embodying, from my perception, don't take what I say, you got to filter it through yourself. You got to be determined to get to the top. And that's where my shift has happened recently. You determine firmly, and determine could be firmly decide, you determine what happens in your life and world, your fate. So basically, we do determine our fate. But how we determine our fate is where our determination is. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to really eat clean and clean up my body so I can be really connected to God and spirit, and then, you know, you go about your day and all of a sudden that Twinkie looks really good, right? Well, sometimes we'll sell that out. We'll sell what we know, so that if our determination wavers at all, we'll wind up grabbing this, which is going to pull us back down instead of staying determined. So determination is what gets us to where we got to go. It's not just about thinking the thoughts, it's about doing the action too. Life helps you determine what you want by beating the crud out of you. So when you're going along and, you know, life gets difficult, it's like saying, do you really want it? Are you really ready to get out of this? Until to the point you're not, it's going to keep beating you up. And one of the easiest examples here is addiction. So for example, somebody gets a really bad drinking habit, and food is a habit too, let's face it. So let's say somebody's drinking really bad. So things get worse and worse as it goes on, right? Relationship starts to struggle. Maybe the person gets in trouble at work, so it gets more and more crowded and more pushed in on you and limited to make you make the change. To me, that's all the negativity in the world actually helps to create positive by pushing you to change and expand. By really, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And to me, I've been the movie Adjustment Bureau really stuck in my mind. I talk about it a lot, but the movie Adjustment Bureau summed that up for me in a really nice package. It's like, it showed this guy's life, and it shows what's happening behind the scenes, which I do think there are things like that behind the scenes that are guiding you a certain way. But the whole purpose is to get to a point where you are self-master, not a slave. Because a slave is affected by the environment, and a master is someone that can help influence the environment. But if you haven't seen Adjustment Bureau, I really recommend you see that movie. I did this picture page the other day, but I just threw it in here because it fits, and I call it In the Ghetto. And consciousness creates the reality you, individually, and we, collectively experience. In order to change a negative life pattern, you must change the consciousness patterns that are the root of the unwanted life pattern, aka mental loops. So we have mental loops, and we play through those. You see how your life does loops and loops through certain things? If we don't change the loop, You can't wish to change the outside pattern. You can do all you want to the outside pattern. You can blame life, but as long as that mental loop is going, you're not going to change much. This change, which is basically a paradigm shift, can be very difficult, but not impossible. You determine what happens in your life by the degree of determination you possess. All of us have ghetto mentality in one way or another. Even if someone lives in a mansion, they can still be living in the ghetto emotionally. And why I use that example, because it actually came up in a session, weird cosmic thing. I was working on somebody, and this concept just kind of popped in my head. And you hear stories about people that are born in the ghetto, this horrible, restrictive place where lots of horrible things are happening. And very few people make it out of there, right? But it's the people that are determined to have a better life that get out of that. And we are all like that in certain ways. We're born into limiting consciousness beliefs, like, thank God I wasn't born into like a KKK family member, where you're like from birth, you're kind of programmed with this negative racism. Other cultures, every culture has its limitation. So whenever you're born into this world, you're born into, a handload of limitations already, whether it's religion, the belief system, all that is limitation. And to get out of it, sometimes it takes a lot of effort. So we are all born into our own mental ghettos. No one is going to give you a free ticket out. You have to set yourself free. And that's come to me too. We all help each other in this group, but there's things that we cannot do as a group. You feed off the group's energy, but there are things that you need to be doing yourself as well. So if you're not out there having this idea and not working on it, you can grab a buddy from the group anywhere and say, hey, help me do this. You're going to call me, I'm going to call you, and we're going to finish this, right? Because you've got to set the determination to do it, the steps to do it. So if you want a great relationship, then you have to do the steps to get there. That is the name of the game for me, freedom. Can you break free from the conscious bondage you or we are born into? So in a way, you could say it's a game. We're born into this like huge cosmic simulator that has like a setup, like a little game does, like when everybody puts their game gear on and plays those interactive games with each other on the internet. It's like you're tapping into this reality, and this reality has limitation. So the name of this game to me is to see how much limitation you're born into. Can you break free from the limitation that you're born into? And again, Adjustment Bureau spoke to me in that way. I'm going to go over just one more thing, and then we'll get into the sessions. And I want to cover, the toroidal field. Y'all know I've been talking about the toroidal field, right? Well, the toroidal field is that energy field that surrounds you. And at the center of that is the heart chakra. That's why I made the green up here. And when the lower chakras, the lower three, are masculine, the upper three are feminine. They're pointing towards each other, just like in the Da Vinci, where they have the pyramids pointing to tip. When they cross, you get the Star of David. So the Star of David, and it's not like they magically cross. It's a symbolism. The symbolism is that the Star of David is telling you when your feminine and masculine are completely married. Okay? In marriage, when you break down that word, it means marry age. So when you completely blend your masculine and your feminine, the marry age begins. And the marry age is peace and things like that, because you are completely balanced in yourself. You don't need to struggle out in the world as much because you are balanced. And during a session, this came to me. And again, movies are my biggest thing that talk to me. And I think everything is connected. I know. Everything's connected. And that you cannot help but get information from the collective in books, in movies, anything that you come across, because people can't help but put it in there, whether they do it unconsciously or consciously. And movies always speak to me. I never can just sit back and watch a movie. I enjoy them, but my mind is always filtering all this information out. And Tron popped in my head. When I saw the new movie, Tron Legacy, I didn't put too much into it, but then as you kind of go through things click in your head, and I begin to think about one particular scene, and you can see in the background here, they can't on the YouTube, but I've got a little scene here where Jeff Bridges and his son are working with this disc, okay? And this is where it came to me, the disc, right? The disc is the toroidal field, okay? The toroidal field is, and Tron holds up this disc at the top, and I did a picture here where Tron holds his disc up. It's like the event horizon of your own toroidal field. So if you're in your heart centered and you connect to another person in that toroidal field, and you're aware of their toroidal field, and you overlap, when you connect to them, that's the second step. Okay, then the third step, you tap into their stuff, and then you can work from that level. So why I'm mentioning all this, because when we start doing the EFT and the Reiki and everything else, we're going to start working from this level. Okay, I want you to start playing with it. That's what I'm talking about, an upgrade. Upgrade is just a consciousness, a way of seeing things differently. So imagine that when you're working on someone, when you tap into that toroidal field that is them, it has all the information about them, not only this life, but past lives. It goes forever, okay? Because in the movie Tron, these discs that who here has not seen Tron? Whoa, okay.
I've seen the first one, I haven't seen the second one.
Oh, the second one is pretty cool. And there's the scene that I'm going to show you is interesting because the guy that created this computer generated, it was back in, was it the 80s or 70s when the first one came out? 70s? Jeff Bridges was in that one too. He helped create this huge landscape, and so he gets dematerialized into this computer. And there's a whole long story that goes along with it. But basically, he's like God inside of it because he's the one that wrote the program. Okay, so in the scene I'm going to show you, huh?
Maybe I did see that.
You probably saw the first one. It was a huge deal back then. But in the scene I'm going to show you, we have God the Father and His Son messing with this disc, this torsion field. So to me, that was like, oh, there's like that little, collective reflective. Call me crazy, but I'm not. So
the son goes into
no, this is
the father out.
This is his son. Yeah, in this one, the son goes in
To bring the father out.
Well, he got like a message, right? And then at the end, he winds up leaving with the female, and the female is really Eve, and you could use that kind of analogy there. But the clip I'm going to show you. Think about the torsion field. Okay, it's going to become more and more talked about in healing work. It's the new thing, and we've been talking years about this toroidal field around us. But if you can be in your center heart here, remember, what did I say about this spot here? What happens when you're really in this spot?
Harmonize.
Okay, it's a harmonizer, but the apple and the seed. What is the seed?
The source.
It's the source of freaking life that's in there, right? So it's really, I mean, okay, I get a little cosmically weird, I guess, but I'm like looking at this apple, I'm like, whoa, okay, the seed of the apple that was the end of the seed's life is holding the seed, okay? So which came first?
Both at the same time.
Right, they did. But, the analogy, which came first, the chicken or the egg? So the cool thing here is I just want you to think about when you're in this space completely, and this is what Jesus was talking about. He said, I and my Father are one. If you're completely in this space, you're not only tapping into your energy, you're tapping into God's power. And the singularity, and I play with words here, is sing you. And the verse is one song. So when you're in the singularity, you're like a single note in the whole orchestra of the multi-universe, okay? And when you're in that right space, man, you're not just channeling healing power from you, you're channeling it right from God, okay? And if you can be in that space and stay in that space, we're going to start playing this more and more and more, because you've got to start owning it, okay, to get into this Holy Grail, or this Holy Spirit consciousness. The more you can hold that and work with others, then not only do you start to transform, but the other people around you. So what happens eventually is just like when Christ walked around, people could be around the energy field and be transformed by that. So during sessions, I'm just mentioning this because we're going to go over it a couple more times, and I'm going to re-mention this Sunday, is that when you're working with people, think about this toroidal field. Try to be in your heart, which is unjudging, okay, completely non-judgmental. Because if you have one little judgment, that separates you. You've got to be in that space. Then imagine their toroidal field connecting to their heart. And then what happens, then we're going to go over picking out the problems in their field. Okay? And I'm going to show you this little clip. I'm going to pause it for the YouTube so I don't get in trouble for YouTube.